just hit me.
Now, there have been a lot of questions about whether these protests that we've seen in Los Angeles are actually full-fledged riots or what we're exactly seeing. So to help explain, I do want to bring in Brian Higgins, a lecturer at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, a former police chief with decades of experience, and someone who was with the National Guard for 8 years. So again, a lot of experience there. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us and help discuss all of this. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Josh, for having me.
Of course. And first off, I did want to ask you here, can you define a protest versus a riot?
So each state would have its own laws on riots. The federal government has its own law. But what's consistent throughout all of them, it is an assembly, usually of 2 or more people, and it is the use of or threat of violence in that assembly.
What are we seeing here? When we talk about Los Angeles specifically, we have seen, as we enter into day 6 here, some of the days where you've had police vehicles that are damaged, you've had looting, you've had injuries of officers. So what exactly are we seeing there? Is it kind of a mix between protests and riots?
So those people who show up who don't have intent to commit violence are protesters. But it's very difficult for law enforcement to separate those out. Can use force. They have to identify the actors who are committing violence. But what's very interesting in the law, and I don't hear often, is the law defines the violence not necessarily against people. So if there's the destruction of property, vandalism,
When you talk about the threshold of violence or property damage, what essentially turns a lawful assembly into an unlawful one?
when they are using violence in their messaging, in their actions, and that violence will be defined at the level that it's used. So if it's turning over a police car, throwing items at a police officer in a car, damaging an officer's property, or hurting an officer, you have violence.
And this is some of the video here from Los Angeles on Sunday. So it's from over the weekend. You can see some of the Waymos there that were set on fire, vehicles. You also saw fire coming from a police vehicle as well. Now, how does police strategy maybe shift when an event crosses the line from protest to a riot?
So in the world of crowd management, we separate that out between crowd management and crowd control. Crowd management is when it's peaceful and the people who are assembled follow the instructions, are not causing any damage. And that could be anywhere where there's a crowd of people. Doesn't necessarily have to be at a protest. Once that crowd of people begin to use violence and they use it collectively as a group, we now have a riot. What we're seeing on the news is obviously rioting.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Kathy Vara in for Carolyn Johnson tonight. Now, this is happening as night 2 of a curfew in downtown L.A. is in effect until 6 a.m. We saw arrests just after that curfew went into effect. And tonight, a standoff with police just 5 miles away in Koreatown. NBC4's Robert Kovacic is there. And Robert, are these people who made the trek from downtown L.A., or is this a separate protest altogether?
As you were just tossing to me, Kathy, a gentleman was just telling me that he was one of the people that made his way 4.7 miles from downtown Los Angeles to right here where we're standing, because the protests have now made their way to Koreatown. And though this intersection, this popular intersection at Western and Beverly, this busy intersection, is empty, the LAPD just leaving, this is some of the evidence that is left behind, the foam batons that were fired onto this crowd. We understand dispersal orders were given. We heard that. And as you take a look at some video, you see the confrontation that was had here between those protesters who left the curfew zone and then made their way here. And then finally, there was a standoff and a skirmish line with members of the LAPD. This continued till just about 10:45 tonight, when members of Metro PD came down and said, everybody needs to get out. Everybody needs to get out now. And we don't believe we saw any arrests here in Koreatown tonight, but certainly they dispersed, and they dispersed quickly. But we do want to take you now back to the curfew zone if we can. This is just after 8 o'clock. As soon as the curfew started tonight, about a dozen people you see there outside of Superior Court. This would be on the streets surrounding Hill and First. Suddenly, LAPD officers in riot gear, one by one, these people were taken into custody, and these protesters were taken into custody without incident.
Yeah. Call you later.
Large group of people. It could turn very volatile if you move law enforcement in there in the wrong way and turn what is just a bunch of people having fun watching cars burn into a massive confrontation and altercation between officers.
A second overnight curfew is in place in downtown Los Angeles as protests against the Trump administration's immigration enforcement continue. Police say they carried out mass arrests following the introduction of a partial curfew in downtown districts of LA overnight into Wednesday. President Donald Trump has sparked controversy by deploying troops to Los Angeles against the wishes of LA's mayor and California's governor. Now the US Defense Department says 700 US Marines could be on the streets of LA as soon as Thursday. Meanwhile, protests similar to those in Los Angeles are popping up in other major US cities, including New York and Washington, with more demonstrations planned in the coming days. In the last few hours, President Trump gave his reaction to the situation in Los Angeles.
What we have is a situation in Los Angeles that was caused by gross incompetence. They didn't have the police to handle it. The police were asking us to come in. They were very late. We had to go in to save a lot of ICE officers, as you know, who were held up. They were holed up in a building, and they were being attacked. And the military went in, the National Guard went in and got them. The police weren't able, unfortunately, to move fast enough, but we moved fast enough. And while we were there, we stayed there, and we stopped tremendous destruction and death.